Tremendous challenges and opportunities exist right now for our nation's water infrastructure. In this podcast, the industry's top leaders and innovative minds share their knowledge and insights for ensuring our water systems are operating safely and efficiently. These discussions are designed to motivate and create vibrant 21st century water systems and the innovative workforce required to lead and operate them. This is 21st Century Water with your host, Aquasight founder and CEO, Mahesh Lunani.
I'm with Mami Hara, CEO at the U.S. Water Alliance, formerly a CEO of Seattle Public Utilities. She was also a deputy commissioner at Philadelphia Water, a visiting scholar at MIT, an adjunct professor at Temple University, and principal at an urban planning and architectural firm. She has degrees from University of Pennsylvania and the Harvard University. A well-educated business owner, teacher, public works executive, and now a CEO of a nonprofit organization. Wow. No one better to talk about the future of U.S. water infrastructure. Welcome, Mami.
Hi, thank you, Mahesh. Nice to be here today.
I really look forward to it. Well, we'll get right into it. You had an amazing career, long and successful, I would say. What are your top highlights of your career? What makes you really proud of what you've achieved so far?
Well, first off, I just want to say that I'm very grateful for all the opportunities that have taught me the power of one water approaches and the importance of water equity, because that is at the core of my career. And I'm also grateful for the opportunities that have enabled me to advance practices in both those areas. And advancing those fronts, which are very intertwined, is by nature based on collective work and achievements. And so rather than just saying the highlights of my career, I would say that the continual highlight of my career is to be part of the One Water community and to be part of a community that's constantly teaching, pushing, and supporting one another along the way. So everything that I've had the fortune to be a part of, whether it's advancing the practice of green stormwater infrastructure or One Water planning and in One Water investments, developing community-led environmental justice visions that led to real change or workforce programs or raising awareness and action related to water threats, they have all arisen from collective efforts by many people across many sectors. And that is part and parcel of the cultural shift that One Water and water equity entail. You know, they really bring home that to do great things in water, everyone has a role. And communities which have been underserved have to come to the fore in that work.
Well, excellent. So the things you did in your career, One Water, EJ, which is environmental justice, water equity, I mean, these are the hottest topics for this decade in this sector. And those are those things that you've actually worked on in the past. So I think you have a tremendous value to add as we look forward for U.S. water infrastructure, which kind of brings me to U.S. Water Alliance. What impact you believe the organization will have in shaping the future of water in the U.S.?
I just want to give recognition to everyone who's been part of the Alliance, including the incredible former CEO and the folks who have helped to shape the programs and campaigns, such as the Value of Water campaign, the Water Equity Network, One Water Summits. You know, the Alliance continues to influence water investment and water management in the U.S. through those programs and through bringing people together across sectors and communities on the country's most pressing water issues. The Alliance has helped to garner understanding and support for water investment, sustainable water management, water equity, and community-centered approaches in decision-making. But in our next chapters of work, such as our Equitable Infrastructure Initiative, our climate program and its initiatives, and our Imagination Challenge, which aims for net zero plus in water management, and our culture building work, we are aiming to alter the DNA of water infrastructure investment in the U.S. You know, that's a tall order, but we aim to fully center and normalize One Water climate action and equitable water investments into national practice. And we hope to do that through fostering the enabling contexts that are necessary: cultural, institutional, systemic, and policy contexts demonstrating and elevating on the ground examples and growing the power of our network and partners and creating an unstoppable movement in those things, in water equity, climate action, and one water practice.
It's quite amazing. First of all, it's very hard shoes to fill.
Yes.
In your role as a new CEO. But it's also a great challenge for you to kind of establish yourself in a new way that you can drive the organization forward. So this water challenge, the imagination, the culture change, these are abstract topics. But really, how do you bring an abstract topic onto the ground to each municipal utility is really a key tactics you have to think about and how to implement this. So it's going to be a challenge, but I feel like you're up to it given your background that you have. Now, I want to talk about the water because a lot of what you're setting up, the policies for the country or enabling those policies in the country, the three largest users of water in the U.S. Let's focus on the U.S. One is agriculture, the second is industrial, and third is municipal. Where is your focus? And do you have a differentiated approach if you're attacking all these three main water use sectors?
And that's a really interesting question. Looking at water through the consumption lens, which is what you're employing here, is a useful one and helps people to understand how water is used in our country or in different regions. And there are many ways of viewing water, and each can be useful. And which ones you use can have profound impact on your work, as you know. And consumption ratios can be a gateway for people to understand water allocation, where it's in play, and sometimes also assist in naming water stresses and perceived water competition. So that's all incredibly useful. The Alliance believes that cooperation in protecting and enhancing water resources and integrating water management and benefits can reduce water stressors and increase water sustainability. So the Alliance and those we work with who are invested in sustainable water outcomes aim to manage water through an integrated lens, in which consumption might be a part of that, but we look at the influence of water management on and by people and the ecosystems they rely on. And that most often leads to different approaches when you use an integrated one water lens that you might arrive at than if you are using, say, a purely regulatory or consumption lens.
Wow, that's a great way of looking at the entire water usage, especially from a consumption point of view. The value of water has been debated a lot in this country, right? There's been a lot of discussions around we're just not getting the price for what the water is worth. The infrastructure has been invested 50 years ago. Now we have to rebuild, etc. What strategies and tactics are you deploying to increase the value of water in the U.S.? And how will this help? Now, focusing on municipal water utilities, how will this help the water utilities in this country?
So I'd like to share a couple Alliance efforts on this front. Through the Value of Water campaign, which includes leaders from many sectors and several other water associations and organizations, the Alliance has increased public and political will for more investment in water. The campaign educates and inspires about how water is essential and valuable and in need of investment. That's first, right? Getting investment is critical. The tactics that we use include regular efforts, such as a national Imagine a Day Without Water program and our annual national poll on public support for water infrastructure investment, which always discovers overwhelming support. And I promise it's an objective survey, even though, despite the consistency of the findings. We also research and communicate on the benefits of investing in water infrastructure and the water workforce. The Alliance and its many partners were influential in the inclusion of water in the bipartisan infrastructure legislation, also known as the Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act. And this approach of demonstrating the transformative benefits of water investment was important. Is it going to be increasingly important? Now that we have the rare opportunity with more federal funding, the job of the Value of Water campaign and others is to lift up stories on the positive impact that water investment can have on people and communities. Another area of work that is very important to us is our work around water affordability and advocating for access to water as a social good that supports our economies and public health. Water systems currently receive, with the exception of this new influx, little federal or state support. And that is at least in context to, with the investments made for other infrastructure and social needs. And currently, most costs fall on utilities and their ratepayers. And this includes the costs of managing water pollution from industry and other upstream polluters, of managing climate impacts driven by other sectors, of educating an internal and external workforce that has sometimes not been well served by the public education system. Making local ratepayers largely responsible for these costs and the many more that drive up the costs of water services is inequitable, particularly for communities who are heavily burdened, such as those that have to take on significant cost among a small number of ratepayers. So through our work around water affordability in the various forms and our programs, we make sure to reinforce that access to water service is a social good that should not just be borne by local water ratepayers.
Right. No, I mean, it is even the United Nations, I believe, about 10 years ago, identified water as a basic necessity that every human right. But I actually liked a very interesting thing that you said. One of the campaigns is Imagine a Day Without Water. I actually posted this. Tom Brady have a hydration process where he lugs around a 2-gallon jug of water in every meeting he goes to, right? And he's recognized as one of the most fittest athletes. So if we take away the water for a day, I cannot imagine how we can live. There's going to be an enormous pain. And that is the best way to know what the value of water is. You just take away the water for a day, right?
Does he drink that all by himself, Mahesh?
All by himself.
It's not there for sharing at the meeting, a 2-gallon container?
He lugs around a 2-gallon jug and then he just keeps sipping, every few minutes. And it's actually an amazing story because it's part of his pliability campaign where you make your muscles pliable and be ready for the kind of, athlete that he is, which is fascinating.
Wow.
Maybe he should become a spokesperson for U.S. Water Lines. That would really be a game changer.
As long as it's tap water in that bottle.
Yeah. But listen, you talked about infrastructure, Bill. How does it accelerate the mission of U.S. Water Alliance? Can you kind of provide specific benefit areas?
Certainly the passage and implementation of the bill is something that we and our partners have worked for a long time. And so now we have to rise to the moment and do our very best to ensure equitable and maximal outcomes from the funding. So by way of first doing no harm, we in the infrastructure world, and I don't mean just water and probably not primarily water, need to ensure that environmental justice communities receive the funding and aren't left behind, and that their work to improve their communities benefits those community members and helps them to thrive in place. So building from the foundation of our cross-sector national network and partners, the Alliance will engage key IIJA opportunities in order to shift the long-term trajectory of water investment towards water equity, climate action, economic opportunity, and One Water solutions. And through our new Equitable Infrastructure Initiative, we'll be sharing principles and guidebooks for equitable infrastructure investment, convening webinars about how to best access and administer state revolving funds and other funding, expanding our water equity network so many communities can work together and exchange knowledge with peers in other communities and access funding for best effect. Also, we'll be hosting related dialogues at our One Water Summit this September in Milwaukee, and a lot more through the initiative. So to kick off this initiative, we've just released part 1 of our 4-part Principles for Equitable Infrastructure Implementation series, and it is available on our website.
Wow, you guys are producing so much thought leadership and topics, whether it's change, innovation, these policies, EJ. I really wonder if utilities have the full access to this stuff and leveraging this because it's really powerful for the country. I want to kind of switch gears a little bit. I want to get a little personal here in terms of what did you learn? You ran Seattle Public Utilities and also were a deputy commissioner at Philadelphia Water. What did you learn from your time at these institutions?
Wow. Working for a utility is really an incredible opportunity to learn deeply about so many things. So it's impossible here to properly enumerate all the topics and even the major lessons, much less thank all the folks who taught me so much. So I'll just share at a very high level that as a leader of a community-owned institution, I learned a lot about the opportunities for driving systemic change that those types of institutions have. This speaks to what the Alliance refers to as the role of utilities as anchor institutions. In those roles, especially Seattle, I learned the power of centering community and the sometimes unrealized potential to create, share, and model power sharing. I really wouldn't claim to have always fulfilled that potential, but it's a great calling, and it is one of the many ways that water can be manifested as a great unifier.
Well, outstanding. I mean, you talk about the fact that playing this role that you played is more of a calling and more around centering how you serve the community than just supplying water. I mean, that's a totally different mindset when you run these organizations with that sort of perspective. But prior to that, you were a principal in a private organization. And it's really not easy to shift from a principal owner of an architectural firm to a public works executive to a nonprofit. It just doesn't seem easy to me, for sure, from where I'm standing. How are you bringing that for-profit experience to your public service, and what has driven that shift for you?
Well, maybe my private firm was never very profitable, so that helps.
But you were there for 15, 20 years, right?
But okay, so joking aside, that had a lot to do with the kind of work that I did in private practice as a planner and urban designer. My work was almost exclusively in service of public interests. And I worked on a lot of very similar issues that I have worked on in the water sector, albeit with a wider lens that included a lot of other infrastructure systems. So, I worked on topics and projects that advanced environmental justice, sustainability, integration of urban systems, community vision plans, sustainable development, and waterways and watersheds, as well as implementation planning that included funding and financing approaches. So those are very related topics. And through that work, once I was able to shed some of my youthful idiocy, which was pretty big, I learned that one of the most important things in that work is to engage and listen deeply to people and to aim for alignment with what the community you're working with values, not just your own personal interests. And I was able to bring that approach and my conviction that sustainable infrastructure is essential to healthy lives and thriving democracies to my work in the public sector. But I had so much to learn entering the public sector, so much to learn about utility and municipal management. And learning how much I didn't know made me realize that I needed to learn to facilitate the abilities and efforts of others to truly share leadership and to always stay focused on the needs of the people that you serve. So I am very grateful that working with the NGOs and utilities that I've been able to be a part of, that they taught me that. And albeit I'm sorry to them all that it took time.
It's clear to me, just listening to you, you love learning. And that's really important as a leader, right? Even I am, and I mentioned this before, I'm a different CEO now, post-pandemic, or almost to the tail end of pandemic than the pre-pandemic, because I had to adapt. when you talk about your shift from private to public sector, I look at it as a Venn diagram, and the common thing between the two circles, one circle is a private sector, the other one is public sector, is a community. I think that's what drove you to make the switch. It sounds like the way you're describing it, which is fascinating. That's what made you to jump from one circle to another circle, because you're still serving the community.
Yes, that's really true.
I want to switch because this is a really important topic. The climate and water, I think the interdependency is very well known. The drought that we see on the West Coast, the floods that we see in the Midwest and East, the rising ocean levels we're seeing in southeast of the United States. I mean, its impact could change the landscape and where and how people live. So I'm going to ask a very big question, and there may not be a perfect answer. What is the roadmap to driving a resilient water system that can sustain this climate change?
This is a fantastic and important question. Currently, there isn't a roadmap. And, we also have to understand that we have to build it in a context where the climate crisis is already changing the landscape of where and how people live. The latest Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report, released earlier this week, was a stark reminder of that. So the choices we make today, in fact, every action taken in the water sector, needs to be made with climate change in mind. Many utilities are already answering this call, and we can learn from the tremendous efforts that they've taken on over the past several years. In 2021, the Water Utility Climate Alliance, otherwise known as WUCA, released a report on leading practices in climate adaptation, with findings on what's working for the largest utilities, at least, in incorporating new climate science into water management and planning and their investments and actions. And you can find that report on the link that I'll share with you later, Mahesh. Maybe you can post it with the podcast. The Alliance itself, though, is working very hard right now to leverage these practices and other insights in the sector to help scale these advancements across more than 55,000 water systems across the nation, and to help those systems integrate water equity into their climate planning from the outset. Because the water sector will only be resilient if their surrounding communities are resilient. This integration is important. Climate stress is often felt as water stress, with low income and BIPOC communities experiencing the brunt of impacts first and hardest. So I do want to note that water issues are often seen as signifiers of climate change, but not necessarily part of the solution. We feel strongly that solutions to climate challenges are often water solutions, and that water can be a gateway for integrated climate action. Climate action means resilience, adaptation, and mitigation efforts working in tandem. And in the water sector, because we are both a driver of emissions and a responder to impacts and need to invest simultaneously on both fronts with very limited resources, it's difficult for us to fully separate climate mitigation and climate adaptation, as so often happens. We see the need at the Alliance to make the most of all climate investments by integrating both mitigation and adaptation when possible. So broadly, we aim to enable all communities to be resilient in the face of a changing climate through decarbonization, culture change, one water, and technology approaches tailored to the place and people of that place. So later this spring, we will release a utility action guide that takes stock of the most promising climate actions in the water sector to date. It's a high-level guide that's meant to kickstart climate action. It walks practitioners through ideas for implementation around 10 key actions that are successfully building resilience, their equity implications, and creative ways to fund climate projects. And lastly, we're also working with a large and incredible group of cross-sector leaders on the development of a National Imagination Challenge. to help better understand and define water's role in climate mitigation. On World Water Day, we'll release this team's 2050 vision for net zero water. In the summer, the team will then release a roadmap for strategic pathways to enact that vision at the watershed, drinking water, wastewater utility, and small systems levels. So that's a lot. Thanks for letting me go on about that.
No, it was a heavy question and it deserved a heavy answer as far as I see. What was, for me, quite interesting to glean from your response, Mami, is the climate stress manifests into a water stress. And if you allow me to extend it, that would manifest into people stress. And that's your tagline right there, right? And so this guide that you're releasing, very soon is really how to reverse that trend, more or less, right? Or how to minimize the impact of that trend, which perhaps could be reversible from a climate point of view. That's outstanding. A great role you are playing, your organization playing, and all the on the affiliate firms are playing. Now, I want to switch on a topic that you mentioned early on in our discussion, change. Change is an awfully important word when it comes to water. Change in how utilities operate, change in how residents consume water, change in how politicians think about water infrastructure, and change in water rates. You can go on and on and on this topic. How do you drive this change? It sounds like a Herculean effort because, if not for people, change is easy. But when you have people, change is difficult, right? What is your perspective on this?
Mahesh, I'm going to start by just citing the Alliance's stated theory of change, if it would be helpful. So its stated theory of change is that the Alliance unites diverse interests to find common ground solutions on complex problems that no one sector can solve alone, and mobilizes a broad network of people and organizations from all walks of life to generate breakthroughs. So the Alliance actively partners and leverages the talents of colleagues inside and outside the water sector to forge progress. So that's the stated theory of change. And I just want to stress that at the heart of it all, that this approach is inclusive and that we see everyone as a one water leader, whether they know that or not. And we bring all stakeholders together to co-create and leverage solutions. And the Alliance laid out this approach in a report called The 6 Essential Capacities for One Water Change Makers. And, I'd just like to, maybe share that link with you afterwards as well. So I won't go over all of the details, but it does lay out the steps for how each person and organization can help to push change. We also employ movement building approaches that can be understood under 3 strategic themes, which we call educate, accelerate, and celebrate. So we educate by building a diverse base of One Water champions through mutual discovery, education, and engagement with everyone who has a stake in the future of water. And we share what we learn from them to help inspire further action, right? We also accelerate the adoption of One Water through our various programs, helping others to pilot and test approaches. And then lastly, we celebrate what works, in order to spread and share and drive innovation in water. And we do all of these things in order to embed and institutionalize the important goals of One Water, equity, and climate action. And, I'd like to just end that response by just saying that we're currently also doing some work that we're very excited about and exploring cultural strategies to advance those goals through our arts and culture work. So please expect more on that.
Wow. There's so many things coming out of the organization, especially this change guide. You said there's 6 ways to drive change in your organization. It sounds like you have a water practice, water MBA school, and you want change guide, you want climate resiliency, you want innovation, you want equity. You got all those books, and policies and guidebooks you can roll out, right, to your members. That's quite amazing, quite amazing. As we wrap our discussion up, I kind of always like to ask the leaders, kind of a CEO to CEO dialogue, to reflect, what is one thing you want to do in future that when you look back, you say, wow, I'm so proud of it. So what I'm talking about is from here on, right, forward. And second part of this question is what guidance you have to those that want to step into water leadership. So I'm wrapping this session with two different questions.
Thank you so much, Mahesh, for that personal note. My dream is to build the One Water movement and integrate water equity and climate-facing practices such that all of those become standard practice. I know that sounds huge, but that is not just an individual effort, right? That means engaging everyone as a water steward, trying to figure out how to do that. And, really working together to facilitate the evolution of the culture of the water sector towards being more community and equity centered. And all of us pulling together to realize the promise of distributed and sustainable water infrastructure that truly facilitates meaningful jobs and thriving communities and inspiring connections to our ecosystems. And, and above all, that Alliance tagline of ensuring a sustainable and equitable water future for all. That's why I joined the Alliance. I fully believe in that mission. It's what I feel like I've been investing in my whole career. And for those who want to step into water leadership, truly listening to those you serve and really understanding and advancing their priorities with them, not just for them, is fundamental. And knowing your own values and allowing those values to help guide you is also essential. As is appreciating your own unique mix of experience, skills, and knowledge, and that of others. The water sector needs all kinds of voices, all kinds of lived experiences and ideas in order to make real progress. And so just joining the choir is not going to push us along. So the last thing I would just say is don't devalue what you have to offer through imitation, and don't discount others' contributions either.
Excellent. Excellent, Mami. As I reflect on our conversation for the last 35 minutes, you said this could be a very big goal to achieve these 4 pillars you talked about: the One Water, the equity, the climate resiliency, and change. But, I'll tell you, in 1980s, when strategy was not a core management subject, Michael Porter came along and simplified what strategy is. And now it's embedded into every organization, right? So these 4 pillars that you're talking about, in 10, 15 years from now, it would be embedded in the way we run our water business, right? I think it's totally achievable. It's totally something you can look back and say, we've done it. So I appreciate the very interesting insights, Mami, with your breadth of experience and trying to drive this One Water equity, climate, and change aspect of this utility business to create the 21st century water infrastructure in the U.S. So I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Mahesh. It was really a delight to speak with you.
Real pleasure.
Join host and AquaSite founder and CEO Mahesh Lunani again next month for another episode of 21st Century Water. Subscribe for free in Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, or Stitcher. Produced by Jag and Detroit Podcasts.